I'd like to ask you, Dean, having come through, there's two things I'd like to ask. One is to expand a bit on your recovery. It's very, very clear from your book that trauma recovery is not a one-way street. Yep. It's not a straight line. It's not incremental. It's very much a wiggly line full of ups and downs and resets. How do you feel now? Where are you at now?
Oh, look, I think my journey has involved a lot of highs and lows, but I wouldn't even qualify for a PTSD diagnosis anymore, put it that way. That's where I'm at. I'm able to now work as a peer worker in a mental health clinic and sit with people who are going through suicidal distress. That's where I'm at right now. And I am able to hold space for them and give them and try and help them manage that crisis. I'm not a clinician, but I can sit with them and I can help give them some support and then guide them, give them some guidance and help them into a referral process that we have at this particular clinic where I live. I feel that where I'm at has been a long journey, but one that has resulted in the post-traumatic growth that you spoke about. And I feel that the relationships I have in my life with Mary, with my kids, with my friends and so on are so much deeper. And the meaning I get out of my life is so much richer. So it's I feel very, very lucky and very privileged. The human connections I have in my life are so much deeper. But it's taken a lot of hard work, and it's taken there are a lot of deep scars there, Clothilde, as well, as a result of that.
But that's a very encouraging message to others that may be struggling, that it's worth the hard work.
You got to work harder.
No one's saying it's easy, but you can recover from PTSD. Yes. I think there's a little bit more understanding of it now, but I think previously people would have thought, oh, he's got PTSD, well, that's it. No, his days are like you said, damaged goods.
I say this all the time to people. I wouldn't qualify for a PTSD diagnosis anymore. So there's no cure. You can still have I can still have PTSD symptoms. Like I might still have a nightmare or something like that, but I wouldn't qualify for a diagnosis anymore.
Yeah,
which is great.
Yeah.
But I think there's a message in that you can recover.
You can recover.
Absolutely. That once there is a diagnosis of PTSD, don't throw people out.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't push them into workers' compensation.
Yep.
These people, Dean is demonstrating now, have such have such power in our communities to sit with people who are, as we're always saying, trauma is trauma. Dean is sitting with people 3 days a week of people who have experienced all sorts of trauma, but he's still able to talk to them because it's trauma. It doesn't matter, whether you've never left your hometown.
You're leading me to my next question, Mary, which was going to be to ask Dean if he felt he could do his current job without having experienced PTSD.
No, I couldn't. I wouldn't even qualify. I wouldn't actually have been interviewed for the job if I didn't have PTSD, because the job requirement actually was to have actually been in suicidal crisis, to actually to have lived experience of mental illness and to have had and been in suicidal crisis. That is actually a job requirement, which I think is progress, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
To have roles for people like this, because in the short time that I've been in this job, people have said to me, so what have you experienced? And I've told them, and they're like, oh, okay, you get it.
I'd like to ask a question though, in journalism, why can we not harness this lived experience for younger journalists? That would just,
I think it's essential. I think it's, I think it's essential. Dean, earlier in our conversation, you experienced a little moment of grief for who you were before. Because we said for journalists, their job is their sense of purpose, their purpose in life and their vocation. Have you recovered a sense of purpose now?
Oh, I can feel it. I can feel it. Absolutely. I love what I'm doing already in this new role. And I can't wait to go back in again and start another day. And I look forward to whoever I might meet and how can I help them? That's what I'm thinking. How can I help that person?
Could you have imagined being where you are now at the beginning of during that first time, the first admittance to Ward 17?
Never. No, I wouldn't have even. Life was such a fog then. There was no tomorrow. There was no. It was just being in that fog of PTSD. There was no future, and that's what going to Ward 17 gave me. It helped clear that fog away. Helped me understand what I needed to do. It gave me the tools to tackle PTSD. Gave me the strategies. Gave me an understanding. Gave me hope. And these were clinicians there who wanted to take that journey with me. And they opened their hearts to me and they talked to Mary. This was the other thing about it, right? These folks actually called Mary and said, tell us about Dean. We want to know what's going on. We want to involve you in his treatment. That was critical as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That must have made you feel supported as well, Mary.
Yes, and I felt heard.
Yep.
It was great because I did have a whole level of experience that maybe they weren't seeing. And I knew that Dean was very good at presenting a front. So I wanted to make sure that, you know, the old mask slipped off and
yes.
Well, I think it's wonderful to come to the end of this discussion with a message of hope and a message of your post-traumatic growth, Dean, and your new sense of purpose in your new role, and recognizing that you couldn't have had this really beneficial contribution in society without having experienced your difficulties as a result of your previous role. I'm just going to check if there are any questions from any attendees that any of the OPC team might want to put forward. I've picked up on a few as we were going through. Oh, yes, there is one about the duty of care we mentioned. And Mary was pointing out that there's a lot of knowledge and lived experience that could be really beneficial to prepare the next generation of journalists and protect them in the future. I'm very interested in this at the Rory Peck Trust. We've actually launched a series of in-person events at the Frontline Club in London, and next Wednesday we'll be having a conversation about the psychological toll of journalism. What we've seen is actually that the younger generation are asking a lot more questions. They're much more comfortable with the language of mental health. They are asking their potential employers, well, you know, what's the work rhythm? What are the support mechanisms in place? Do you know what the situation is now at Reuters? Do they have programs now that support journalists? Have they come around in the end to some of your recommendations that you tried to put in place when you were first setting up a mental health program at the company?
Well, I wasn't replaced when I left, and the anecdotal evidence I have from people who still work at Reuters is that no, the efforts that I tried to make to have the mental health of Reuters journalists a pillar, an absolute priority of the organization is not the case, which disappoints me greatly. I think Reuters had an opportunity to actually set the global benchmark for journalists' mental health, and I think they failed. And I think that was a great shame. It's a massive lost opportunity. And I just hope another media organization out there does try to set the standard, whether it's the BBC, whether it's CNN or the New York Times. I just hope another organization does that, because journalists are suffering and they need someone to show leadership, real leadership on this, to make journalists' mental health an absolute priority.
They certainly do. And I can attest to the fact that I've spoken to a lot of young journalists who I think are going to vote with their feet. And if you want to attract the best talent in the future, you're going to have to run healthy newsrooms, because people won't,
100%.
They won't want to sacrifice everything that was expected of your generation to do the job.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It was such a pleasure to speak with both of you. Thank you so much for sharing, Mary, what it was like, the difficulties of living with a partner struggling with trauma. I think that's what's so tricky about trauma. There's a massive ripple effect throughout families, throughout communities, etc. And like you say, trauma is trauma. There's all sorts of different ways that you can come across it. And we all need to become much more comfortable with talking about it. And I just cannot recommend Dean's memoir enough. It's a wonderful, wonderful read. It's very touching, very open. It's very clear Mary helped Dean share his humanity in the book. It's a fantastic read and a really, really good, hopeful book for anyone dealing with any of these problems who wants to be able to have some help putting these things into words, which so often is the struggle. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clothilde. Thank you very much for hosting us.